So we get asked by a friend whether or not Jeremiah Smith is absolutely the guy that we make him out to be. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, I saw EA Sports made a true freshman who has not played a single snap in college football an 84 overall rating, which for those of you that haven't played this game since you were very tiny and young, that is like calling that dude the greatest freshman who has ever played college football. Perhaps that's not true, but you can understand we're thinking about it when we talk about Jeremiah Smith. And that's just who that dude has been. I try to put this in perspective by talking about what other people seem to know about college football, what other people seem to know about Jeremiah Smith. Okay? So Mickey Marotti is a strength coach at Ohio State, and he is in the business of making championship-level football players, as many of you very well know. The idea that Jeremiah Smith could keep up in strength and conditioning is one in which I don't throw that one out. I wanted to be a strength coach when I was younger. I wanted to develop guys like Jeremiah Smith into monsters. But as I got into that job, one of the things that I learned is I'm not developing a damn thing. Not really. What I am doing is not building a race car from scratch, right? Something that goes very fast and that I had a whole lot of engineering to do with and had to swap motors and transmissions to make a 9-second car out of, let's just say, your daddy's 96 Mustang, whatever that might be to you. In the college football landscape, that's not what you're doing at a place like Ohio State or Oklahoma or any of the other places that I want it to work. What you're going to be doing in those instances most of the time is inheriting a Ferrari. It's like inheriting, trying to think of a car that non-car people would absolutely be geeked about being fast. Maybe it's a Jeep Trackhawk. That seems to be catching people's attention right now because that's a 707 horsepower car. That's essentially what you're getting when you get into college football. Even so, we don't expect that Ferrari, which is a road car in this particular analogy, to make it onto a Formula One circuit and compete, because a Formula One car is a bespoke piece of machinery that is built for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to win Formula One races. You can't take it onto the street for a lot of different reasons, not the least of which is it's not street legal. It is built to just be fast, right? So you got to develop that sports car, that road car, into a Formula One car, and that usually takes time. Right? That usually takes more than a little bit of time. It actually takes maybe a couple of years. That's why we used to do this thing called red shirt players, to give them opportunities to grow into the kind of body that they would need to compete at a high level in college football, right? I think we kind of got away from that with Trevor Lawrence coming onto the scene, because Trevor Lawrence not only became, him, Trevor Lawrence became the first true freshman to lead a college football program to a national championship since Jamel Holloway did in 1985. And because he's able to do that, and because we become kind of lax around the transfer portal and kids wanting to play, we got to see more guys playing right away as true freshmen, some being quarterbacks, some being wide receivers like Jeremiah Smith. And we've come to believe that guys like him, Travis Hunter comes to mind, are just going to do that. That's just not normal, though, guys. Like, I understand that we think that these players are coming more prepared, better prepared to play at a high level, but it's more like trying to solve this Rubik's Cube than you think. It's making sure the pattern is the pattern, that the process is the process, whether you're using the CFOP or you're using the beginner's method, whatever you do to try to get your Rubik's Cube solved. And Mickey Marotti is one of the best to ever do it in solving a Rubik's Cube or creating an outstanding college football player out of assets that, you're lucky to have, but you still got to develop those things into a bespoke Formula One car, to continue with that analogy. So Jeremiah Smith arrives with a lot of pomp and circumstance, because that's what you do when you are the number one rated player in your class, number one overall, period, not just at wide receiver. And as I am continuing to think about what that means for a wide receiver to be that guy, I think about Julio Jones and what he meant at Alabama. And I'm sure that there's like a number of people that also remember that Julio Jones going to Alabama was a big deal at the time. And I want to be very clear about that. When Julio Jones decided to commit to Alabama, Alabama wasn't nobody. Okay? Nick Saban had just got there in 2007. Julio Jones is in the 2008 class. And he was a real coup for Nick Saban and really a harbinger of things to come. Like when Julio came through, it was, oh God, they might actually be good, because not only was Julio that guy, Julio would make sure that other guys wanted to come and play with him, right? Like that's why you bring a guy in like Julio Jones. It's not just to be your star at wide receiver, but to also invite other players to say, hey, look, we're serious about winning championships here. You might want to join. That might be what is happening at Colorado right now with Travis Hunter, because Travis Hunter is one of the best players in the sport. He's got a 95 overall rating in this latest EA Sports College Football 25 for wide receiver alone. Now, I'll be interested to see if they let him play both ways, right, on Dynasty mode. And if he does, will he get a 95 rating as a cornerback? And as an aside, since we're talking about Jeremiah Smith and we're talking about, well, Travis Hunter, and we're talking about, wide receivers, I saw that Coach Prime and others had said that Travis Hunter is the best wide receiver in the sport, and I'm gonna slightly pick a fight about that. The reason I'm gonna slightly pick a fight about that is because he's in the Big 12, which features, among others, Tatera McMillan, Jaden Higgins, Brendan Presley, Dorian Singer, and among that group, he ain't the best wide receiver. Like, you just look from a production standpoint alone, he ain't the best wide receiver, right? Like, I don't think that's out of pocket. I don't think that's out of line. I think that's just what it is, right? He's got to go make more plays. He's got to really show us that he can play a full season without getting injured and hurt. Like, I understand that hit that he took from Henry Blackburn was not his fault, but you get my point there, right? Also, I want to add into this, like, anytime that we talk about Travis Hunter being a great wide receiver or even the best wide receiver, one of the things that I always think is Alec Ironmaner is out there somewhere going, well, if he's the best wide receiver, or he's a 95 rating, I'm a 96. Like, that dude put a pop knot on Colorado's head for 294 receiving yards, 13 catches to 3 TDs, and led his team to a comeback win down 29-0 at halftime. Travis Hunter still ain't done nothing like that, right? That's the point that I would raise on that one. But back to Jeremiah Smith, it's also what he's able to do not on a football field. So that dude's got a 14-second 110-meter hurdles, which is flying. He's got a 22-second 200 meters, which is not flying, but it's fast enough. And he's got a 54-second 400-meter hurdles. And I'm here to tell you, as a guy that ran the 400-meter hurdle, or not 400-meter hurdle, 400 meters flat at the college level, dog, you running 54 over hurdles, you are one of the strongest individuals on the face of the planet, because the lactic acid that is going to be in your veins coming to your blood is just, it's mean. It's just nasty. Like, I remember having some workouts because we used Clyde Hart's program at Tulsa, right? Because that's where Coach Gully, Steve Gully, had come from to train for the 400 meters. And the 400 meters under Clyde Hart was more about not developing the speed that wasn't there, but just making sure that speed could go the distance over 400 meters, which is why I always kind of would tell people that when Clyde recruited 400 meters sprinters, he did not compete guys, he did not recruit guys that were slow. He recruited guys that were fast and reminded you a lot of Jeremy Warner, right? Guys that felt like they could be running the 800 if that's what they chose to do, because they were just that talented. However, I just wanted to point that out because to talk about what Jeremiah Smith is or isn't or could be, you gotta know that he has that sort of skill, not just in football, but in track and field and any other sport that he wanted to play. Matter of fact, as I was talking about Julio Jones, one of the things that pops into my mind is Julio Jones also could have been one of the great basketball players of our generation, and most people that played with him or football or basketball will tell you so. As a matter of fact, I think Boogie Cousins go out of his way to be like, yo, y'all never seen Julio on a basketball court. I'm trying to tell y'all, that dude was different. And Boogie Cousins, he was on an Olympic team, you know what I'm saying? Like, Boogie Cousins won a great Kentucky ball players, maybe great men's college basketball players that we've seen. Like, I don't know enough about that sport to be talking about it in terms of the best ever like I would for football. But again, it's just kind of underscoring what we come to know to be true about a guy like Julio Jones, and that's the comp for one Jeremiah Smith. The other thing to note in here is that Mark Pantoni, who is outstanding at his job, he's general manager, player personnel at Ohio State, kind of told Coach Urban Meyer, who's doing big noon games, right, like what he thought. And I'm going to preface that by saying that when Mark was with Urban Meyer at Florida, all they did was win championships. He got to see guys like Carlos Dunlap, guys like Percy Harvin, guys like Cam Newton, guys like Tim Tebow. So he knows from really talented football players, and he's not prone to, hyperbole. It's just not how he wants to get down. That's not how he wants to talk about what he's doing. So for him to be like, I don't want to say, I hate giving it to a kid this way, but to talk about this guy, Jeremiah Smith, is to talk about one of the best true freshmen that he has ever seen coming in through the door. Like the way in which he moves, the way in which he gets down, the way in which he practices has not been like any other freshman that he has ever seen. And he said this, and Coach Meyer has echoed this. And if you go watch the spring game for Ohio State, you'll see him talking about just that, right? I guess the other part on that is I tend to trust Mark Pantoni's judgment about most things, especially when it comes to player personnel, most things around football. What I think is most interesting about Julio Jones and Jeremiah Smith is that Julio Jones joined a football team that didn't have a number one wide receiver, not like him at least, right? Didn't have his sort of talent, didn't have his sort of skill when the ball was in the air. Certainly didn't have his skill that he's going to have at quarterback in a guy like Will Howard or Aaron Nolan or Julian Sand, because I just don't think that Greg McElroy was that dude. No disrespect to you, Greg. Y'all were at a different juncture, right? That's all, right? I think we need to say that Jeremiah Smith is showing up to a receiver room at Ohio State that has been one of the best in the country for the past 6 years, right? Basically since Brian Hartline was given the keys to that thing and said, make it do what it do, baby. And he has done that. We've seen Jaxon Smith-Njigba come through. We've seen Marvin Harrison Jr. come through. We've seen Julian Fleming come through and then go to Penn State. We've seen Emeka Ibuka become that dude. We've seen Brandon Ennis join up. He's going to be a dude. Carnell Tate is a dude. And yet you got guys that are 5 stars, guys that we've been excited about for a very long time, talking about playing next to Jeremiah Smith in practice during the spring, right? And they're going, one way or another, that dude got to find a way to get on the football field because he's just too good for it not to happen. That, I think, that ought to scare most people. Like that guys in that room that are going to be fighting with Jeremiah Smith for touches, who have been around Ohio State, who have, for lack of a better term, paid their dues, are like, this dude just built different. So for me to come out here and talk about a guy that's got an 84 overall rating on a video game that I'm going to play, that you're going to play, that most of the public just doesn't care about, that's enough. Or at least it should be enough, right? That it should be enough. It should be the stamp of approval that you're looking for if you are watching this particular show and asking yourself, is that guy that guy? Okay. Now I'm going to just finish this Rubik's Cube, and I'll see you the next time.